Welcome back, college football fanatics. It's College Football with Sam here to preview Iowa versus Iowa State and also give my score prediction. But before we do so, I want you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, share this video around, and also comment your own preview and prediction down in the comments section below, as I pride this channel on being interactive with you, producing content that not just I enjoy, but also content that meets your standard of quality and that you enjoy as well. So please engage with me in the comments section, whether you agree with my analysis and prediction or not. And again, like the video, subscribe to the channel by clicking that big red subscribe button and also hitting that notification bell so that you can get notified when we release new college football content. And also so that when we do hit 20,000 subscribers, thanks to you, you can participate in our giveaway. This game, the Cyclones against the Hawkeyes, has been a very one-sided rivalry. And that's not because Iowa is a blue blood program. It's rather because Iowa State has not been a storied college football program one bit. The only story surrounding Iowa State in their history is the fact that they have been terrible, to be frank, and for a long time were the punching bag of the Big 8 and Big 12 teams. Iowa leads the series 47-23. But Iowa State has a coach in Matt Campbell who, despite the fact that he's only beaten the Hawkeyes once, has made them into a competitive program that you should never underestimate. Matt Campbell has at Iowa State a record of 54-48. He has played for a Big 12 championship in 2020, where his Cyclones finished first in conference standings. He has finished fourth place, tied for fourth or higher in Big 12 conference standings a whopping 5 times with the Cyclones. Could be 6 times, depending on how the 2024 Cyclones do. And they were at the top of college football, leading the nation in returning production. There's so many great players to look out for and pay attention to on Iowa State's roster. And it's the same with Iowa's roster. And Iowa didn't lead the pack, didn't lead college football in returning production like Iowa State did, but they were 9th, and they led the Big Ten in that category. So 2 experienced rosters, 2 veteran head coaches in Matt Campbell, who's been coaching at the FBS level since 2011, and you also have Kirk Ferentz, and Kirk Ferentz has been around for quite some time. He has been coaching Iowa, the Hawkeyes, since I want to say, 1999, and he briefly coached Maine from 1990 to 1992. Kirk Ferentz is 69 years old, and he's been with the Hawkeyes for over 2 decades now, closing in on 2.5 decades. Maybe he can get to 3 decades. I don't know. We'll have to see. But again, 2 experienced coaching staffs, 2 elite defensive coordinators. I think Phil Parker's the best in the country. John Heacock is certainly up there. 2 rosters that are experienced, and an in-state rivalry that kicks off this Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:30 Central Time on CBS and Paramount Plus. Iowa is currently a 3-point favorite, and the Hawkeyes won last year's game 20-13 in 2023. Where Iowa State was at home, they were favored to win by FPI, but Iowa was favored by 3.5 points in the spread. Iowa State outgained Iowa 290 yards to 235. They had 19 first downs to Iowa's 9, and both had a turnover. The Hawkeyes also lost the time of possession battle, which is rare for a Kirk Ferentz team to lose. But because of a Sebastian Castro interception return and Iowa's defense holding the Cyclones to 3 points in the first half, 3 points in the first 3 quarters, and only letting up later in the game, allowing their first and only Iowa State touchdown on a 14-play, 80-yard drive with just under 3 minutes left in the fourth. Great defense and great special teams once again gifted Iowa another close victory. This time on the road against a non-conference but in-state rival. Iowa also repeated this exercise, this ritual, against teams like Nebraska, and Wisconsin on the road, Illinois at home. For much of last year, Iowa won close games, and that was why they went 10-2. Iowa State went 7-5, had a bounce back year from a 4-8 2022, and they played Texas competitively. They played Kansas competitively. They lost to Ohio early in 2023 after losing to Iowa, but then they beat Oklahoma State, who appeared in the Big 12 championship game, and after a 2-3 start where they got blown out by Oklahoma, they beat TCU, they beat Cincinnati, Baylor barely lost to Kansas, they beat Kansas State in a crazy game to close out the season. And I'm talking about last season's matchups so much because, especially with rivalries, things are going to be close, they're going to be tight, and you also want to understand the different styles of these teams. Iowa State is more dynamic at wide receiver, at quarterback. They look to be better on offense entering this scheme, and they do have a great defense. Iowa looks to be better on defense. They could have the best defense in all of college football, but they do also look to be improved on the offensive side of the ball. And Matt Campbell broke through in 2022, beating Iowa in Kinnick Stadium. So Iowa wants to get revenge and make sure that they do not give up their home to their in-state rival this season like they did 2 years ago. When I look at these offenses, and I want to start out with offenses because that's really always what we have done so far on college football with Sam, is look at offenses and then look at the defenses. It's very interesting. Iowa State, I think, obviously has an advantage at quarterback. Rocco Becht, I believe, is a top 30, top 25, maybe top 20 quarterback nationally. And his wide receivers are very good too. Jalen Noel is one of the better wide receivers in the Big 12. And it's the same with Jaden Higgins. And they were able to catch very impressive balls, make good plays, and sometimes Rocco Becht was throwing into ill-advised positions, throwing into double coverage or areas where it could have been picked off. The ball could have. But it's against North Dakota. You want to see what you have, and sometimes quarterbacks just want to heave it up there. And Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins did a very, very good job through the air. They both averaged 15 or more yards per reception. Becht overall went 20 of 26 for 267 yards, 2 touchdowns, averaged 10.3 yards per pass attempt, and he had 4 carries for 8 yards, and he also had a rushing touchdown. He accounted for all 3 of Iowa State's touchdowns, where they beat North Dakota 21-3. And if some say, well, that doesn't look too good because they're struggling against an FCS team before playing Iowa, well, as I've said multiple times, these teams that play big games early, critical games early, are going to hide things for their bigger game, for their quality matchup. Like Texas and Michigan did that. Texas had not attempted a single downfield pass against Colorado State when that's their MO at times. Michigan barely used play action, and I thought was very vanilla on blocking on the offensive line. For Iowa had an offensive explosion against Illinois State, but then again, it's Illinois State, and they were only up 6-0 at the half. For Iowa State, they had an injury to Abu Sama, but I think they were just being very cautious in taking him out the minute he got a little dinged up, and Tom Fornelli seconds that. And for the Hawkeyes, I just think when they have the defense that they do, and they've obviously upgraded offensive coordinator with Tim Lester coming and replacing Brian Ferentz. McNamara has shown he's capable before, and Iowa does have some good offensive linemen, running backs, and tight ends. I thought that it was bound to happen at some point that once you upgraded the basically head coach for offense, that's the offensive coordinator in today's college football, that you would see some type of improvement. And Iowa showed us that in week 1. Does it mean anything of significance against a team like Iowa State, who's one of the better Power 4 teams? Well, we'll have to see. But that's the beauty of this Saturday, and that's the beauty of Saturday when college football is on, when it's during the season, is you learn things about teams. Especially this early, you learn exponentially more about teams. as the games go on. And sometimes even later in the season, you learn things that you didn't see before or that you didn't think were possible, like when Michigan beat Ohio State for the first time. But here we are on offense. And while I got to give Iowa State a big advantage at wide receiver and also a significant advantage at quarterback, I want to point out that Cade McNamara went 21 of 31 for 251 yards, 3 touchdowns. His QBR and passer rating was worse than Beck's, but he had his best game in an Iowa uniform. Last year, he never had more than 200 passing yards in a single game, and he never had a passer rating of higher than a 137.3, never had a QBR of above 45.8. He had a 52.6 QBR and overall a 167.7 passer rating, better numbers than he's ever had at Iowa, and actually one of his better games in college football in general. He did well at Michigan against certain teams, but in other games he did not look good either. Like I've said at Michigan before, McNamara was a good game manager. As a Michigan fan, I was very happy with what he did at Michigan, but there were some ups and downs. There just were. And you certainly saw his up against Illinois State. And a freshman wide receiver in Reese Vanderzee had 5 receptions for 66 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. They have Caleb Brown, Jarriett Bowie, Seth Anderson, and some other players in that receiver room, some of whom are very young, that I think can emerge now that they aren't held back as much by Brian Ferentz, who's an offensive analyst at Maryland. He might actually be the reason why their offensive line looked good against UConn. But anyway, I don't want to get too distracted here. Iowa State has advantages at quarterback and receiver, but Iowa has some players that could potentially close that advantage there. At running back, Iowa has a good stable of backs in Jason Patterson, in Caleb Johnson, in LaShawn Williams, and Kamari Moulton. They have 4 running backs who I think would be serviceable at the Power 4 level. I think Caleb Johnson has the highest ceiling and is the best out of all of those, as showcased by his consistent big play capability. But last season, he did struggle. And if the offensive line isn't good this season, he may not be the best running back for Iowa, the running back that gives them their best chance to win. But him and Moulton combined for 30 carries, and they had over like 175 yards. Caleb Johnson had 11 carries for 119 yards, averaged 10.8 yards per carry, 2 rushing touchdowns. He did have a long of 64, though, and he also had an 18-yard touchdown run on top of that 64-yard run. So a lot of those rushing yards for Caleb Johnson were from explosive plays. Honestly, it was probably Kamari Moulton who had the more consistent day outside of big plays. He was 19 of 65 for 3.4 yards per pop. And he was just kind of the bruising back and was the starting running back in this game. I really like Iowa's stable of running backs, but I do think that Abu Sama, 5 carries, 36 yards, 7.2 yards per carry. And then when he was a freshman in 2023, he had 84 carries for 614 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 7.3 yards per carry. He may be the best individual back out of this room, but I would give Iowa the edge here based off of depth. On the offensive line, I would give it to Iowa here. Iowa State really struggled on the offensive line last year, particularly at run blocking. Iowa, I think, has more experience. I think Iowa is better at pass blocking and also better at run blocking. I think especially the first and third points hold. With pass blocking, I think both lines struggled last season, though Iowa State did pass more, so maybe it was in fact the Cyclones that were better at pass blocking than the Hawkeyes. And then at tight end, Iowa State does have a good tight end, but I think that Iowa with Luke Lachey and with Addison Ostrenga and the players that they have are rather impressive, including Zach Ortworth. I mean, they have a stable of tight ends that I would say 3 or at least 2 of them can play competitively at the Power 4 level. Benjamin Brahmer is the tight end. I don't know if he was injured or if he didn't play much against North Dakota. Doesn't look like he played much at all. I don't know necessarily what's up with him. Hopefully he's playing against Iowa. He had 28 receptions for 352 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, but he's a good tight end. So both of these teams have a lot of similarities on offense. Ultimately, I would say that Iowa State is more modern, more spread, much better in the passing offense from what we know. Iowa is more play complementary football, which just means run the ball, control the clock, and use your tight ends in the passing game with play action. On defense, I would give Iowa State the edge at safety. Iowa State has a stable of, I would say, 3 safeties that are really good college football players and some of the best defensive backs in the entire Big 12. Iowa State's safety room is Malik Verdon, Bo Freiler, and Jeremiah Cooper. Some of the best safeties in all of college football reside there, and they're all starters. And three starters who are some of the better safeties in all of college football. And that is an advantage, especially when your safeties and linebackers are more often to be covering tight ends. And that's one of Iowa's strengths on offense, particularly in the passing game. Iowa State's defense so far this season, they have earned they've earned 3 sacks, 2 passes defended. They earned an interception that was by Bo Freiler. He also had a pass defended. The sacks were by Kennard Snyder, defensive end, John Klosterman, backup linebacker, and J.R. Singleton, a starting defensive lineman. That's really all I would give Iowa State, though, is their safety room. And Iowa could lead here with Quinn Schulte and Xavier Nwapka. I actually think that Iowa does have, if you just look at, 2 safeties from each team, Iowa's probably better in Nwapka and Schulte than, let's say, Verdon and Freiler, or you could do a combination of Verdon and Cooper. But because Iowa State runs a 3-3-5 with 3 safeties, they do, have better depth. A lot of that, of course, is due to the fact that that's how they're built as a team. They run a 3-3-5 that's not 3 high safety, but they play 3 safeties. And then Iowa runs a 4-2-5, more defensive linemen. And I think their 5th defensive back, Sebastian Castro, the cash position, is like kind of a hybrid linebacker, defensive back. If I'm wrong on that, please correct me. I'm still learning football terminology and specific scheming. I'm much better than I was last year and even the year before that. But I'm still learning and getting the hang of things. I hope I understand that correctly. And that's why I would give Iowa State the edge at safety, Iowa the advantage at corner. If you want to look at the defensive back room as a whole unit, I would pretty easily give that to Iowa there. They have one of the best overall defensive back rooms in the country. They're not as strong at corner as they were last year, but they're still very strong at safety. Sebastian Castro is a veteran presence, and their corners are going to get better throughout the season. Defensive line and linebacker is really where these teams separate, though. Iowa State does have some injuries at linebacker. Will McLaughlin and Caleb Bacon, it does not sound like they are likely to play this coming Saturday, which really hurts as they're good linebackers. Iowa State, when healthy, does have one of the Big 12's better linebacker rooms. And to go up against a team like Iowa who uses the tight end, that means the safeties and the backup linebackers are going to have to step up. John Heacock is going to have to shift some things around and make adjustments, potentially on the fly, as you really don't know the impact of injuries, like the full impact of injuries, until you see how your team performs without those players. And then, of course, you have to make adjustments based off of that. But Iowa's defense, they got 4 sacks, 7 TFLs, 4 passes defended. Jermari Harris had an interception, and Iowa has done a very good job under Phil Parker of forcing turnovers. Their defensive line has historically been their weak spot for Phil Parker's defenses, and they have not been weak. They just haven't been as elite as the linebackers or the defensive backs have. Aaron Graves had 3 sacks. Brian Allen had 1 sack. Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson each had a pass defended. They're both so good at tackling. They're good at getting to the quarterback when they're assigned to, and they're They're good at pass defense. They're good at everything. Those are the two best. They could be the two best linebackers in the country. I think they are, but the reason I paused there is it's a little too early to tell. I certainly do think that they're the best linebacker duo, though, out of all in the country. And that's saying something because Oklahoma State has a good linebacker duo. Georgia does. Clemson. I mean, there are many teams that have NFL-level linebackers, but I think Iowa is a step ahead of all of those. When it comes to my prediction for this game, it wasn't really that hard, if I'm being honest. Iowa State has played Iowa close, historically, whether it's Matt Campbell, or you can even go before that, but especially under Matt Campbell versus Kirk Ferentz, these teams have been very competitive. Iowa, of course, has Matt Campbell out of his, 8 years, now 8 years, could be 9 years, depending on if my prediction fulfills or if Iowa just wins this game regardless of whether my score is even close or not. Could be 1-8 against Iowa. He's currently 1-7, Matt Campbell is. Despite Kirk Ferentz holding a 7-1 record over Matt Campbell's Iowa State, they have played very close. But I think that what is going to help Iowa win this game and control this game is the fact that I think Iowa's offense is top 100. They could even be top 75 with a defense that is easily top 5 and that I think is certainly top 2, if not number 1. If Iowa just has a top 100, top 75 offense with the elite defense that they have and the great special teams, you're talking about a team that's probably not just ranked throughout the season, top 20, top 25 for sure, maybe top 15. You're talking about a team that is power rated, that has the capability of matching up with a lot of top 25 teams and straight up beating them neutral field and perhaps game controlling them. They look like, through one game, we don't want to overreact here, it looks like they have upgraded at quarterback, like McNamara's improved. They've upgraded at receiver. The offensive line looks better. The running backs look better. Just the offense in general looks like it has the capacity to at least shift into a higher gear or two. And the defense is still the defense. And this time, unlike last season, Iowa's at home, and Kinnick Stadium is a hard place to win at unless you're just thoroughly better than Iowa and play a better game than they do. See Michigan in 2022 or Penn State when they visited them in 2019. Like, you need to be a near elite college football team to just walk into Kinnick Stadium and dominate that team. To win in Kinnick Stadium, you need to be a good team, maybe a great team. And I think with the offense that Iowa has, which again, not even good, it's just bad to below average, no longer terrible, and maybe it's average, heck, maybe it evolves to be above average. That with an elite defense is going to kill teams that are not both better coached and more talented than Iowa. And I do not think Iowa State is more talented and better coached than Iowa. Combined with the fact that this is a rivalry, it's at home for Iowa. Both teams have about the same amount of experience returning, and Iowa is the healthier team. I do think that Iowa is going to cover this 3-point spread, and I think they're going to win by double digits. I think they're going to win 23-10. They're going to score some touchdowns on this Iowa State defense, especially with the fact that Iowa State's strength is pass defense. It's not run defense. And especially with the linebackers being out, that run defense is going to be tested. Same with covering Luke Lachey and Addison Ostrenga. And look, Cade McNamara is a good enough quarterback to get the ball to the tight ends, to the running backs, even to the receivers in short yardage. He seemed willing to take deep shots against Illinois State. So if Tim Lester has truly opened up this offense, you're going to see it unfold, I think, on Saturday. And I think there's a bit of truth to that. But more importantly, Iowa's defense is just going to pounce. And eventually with the offensive line, the run game, and the fact that I think Lester, the tight ends, and McNamara are going to test that front in the pass game, and Patterson and LaShawn Williams and Caleb Johnson will test that front in the run game. I do think that Malik Verdon and Bo Freeler and Jeremiah Cooper, Jontez Williams, and Darian Porter will probably lock down Iowa's medium to deep passing threat to a large degree. But eventually there may even be some holes in that secondary due to the fact that I don't think this defensive front can slow down Iowa for the whole game. Iowa State's path to winning, I think, is Rocco Becht, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, Benny Ngodi, and Benjamin Brower and Steve Okoltz really utilizing that short passing game due to Iowa, what Penn State did to them in 2023. Just take what they will give you. Because Iowa's defense is not known for being this uber-aggressive unit. They do not want to give up big plays. They'll wait for you to make mistakes. They'll wait for you to get impatient. Be patient. Go on long drives where you pass short and intermediate. Occasionally use the run if you think it suits you. That's the formula to beat Iowa, along with the linebackers and the front stepping up for Iowa State. But I think Iowa has this. They'll win 23-10 and cover that 3-point spread. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thank you to Crash2488 and Brasco Rascal for being Heisman members and sponsoring this video and channel. Thanks to Chris Lane, Counter Little OH, Ismar, and Tyler Nye for being All-American members and sponsoring this video and channel. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for sponsoring this video as all conference Patreons. After Saturday, probably Saturday night, I will update the Patreon list, the shout-out list. Just want to use that as a public service announcement that just because I expect, especially as Patreon's updated and I get back to operating at full capacity once my sickness is over with, and it's nearly over with, I do expect people to be regularly joining the Patreon, potentially, or YouTube memberships when those do roll out. So to make it so that I don't have to update the list potentially every day or every other day, I'm just going to do it at the end of every college football week. And in the preseason, it'll be the same thing. At the end of every week, the Patreon list will be updated. So thank you for supporting the channel. If you want free signed College Football with Sam merchandise, become a Heisman member for $25 a month for 6 months, and that will be delivered to you. Otherwise, you can purchase my merchandise by visiting the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment, and you will also find the link to my Patreon page there. Have a great day, guys, and go Cyclones and go Hawkeyes. See you around.